A U.S. judge has ruled the National Security Agency's mass collection of telephone data unconstitutional. Federal District Judge Richard Leon said the electronic spy agency's practice was an arbitrary invasion. The agency's collection of metadata including telephone numbers and times and dates of calls was brought to light by ex-NSA contractor Edward Snowden. The White House dismissed the suggestion Mr. Snowden receive amnesty if he stopped leaking documents. In his ruling in a Washington, D.C. federal court on Monday, Mr. Leon called the NSA's surveillance program indiscriminate and an almost Orwellian technology that enables the government to store and analyze the phone metadata of every telephone user in the United States. Irreparable harm. He ought to be returned to the United States, again, where he will face full due process and protection under our system of justice, that we hope he will avail himself of. J. Carney, White House spokesman. The ruling came in a lawsuit brought by conservative activist Larry Klayman, a user of a Verizon mobile telephone who challenged the NSA's collection of metadata on his behalf and that of a client. The NSA had ordered Verizon, one of the largest phone companies in the U.S., to disclose metadata, including telephone numbers, calling card numbers and the serial numbers of phones, of all calls it processes in which at least one party is in the U.S. Mr. Leon ruled the plaintiffs had demonstrated a substantial likelihood of success on the merits of their Fourth Amendment claim and that they will suffer irreparable harm absent relief, referring to the clause in the U.S. Constitution that bars unreasonable search and seizure by the government. He issued a preliminary injunction against the NSA surveillance program but suspended the order to allow for an appeal by the Justice Department. Through Glenn Greenwald, a journalist with whom he has close ties, Mr. Snowden issued a statement hailing the ruling. "I acted on my belief that the NSA's mass surveillance programs would not withstand a constitutional challenge, and that the American public deserved a chance to see these issues determined by open courts," he wrote. According to the New York Times, today, a secret program authorized by a secret court was, when exposed to the light of day, found to violate Americans' rights. He added, "It is the first of many." Earlier in the day, the White House rejected the suggestion that Mr. Snowden be granted amnesty, a day after a top NSA official publicly suggested a deal could be reached to keep Mr. Snowden from leaking more documents. White House spokesman Jay Carney said the U.S. government continues to press Russia, where Mr. Snowden has been granted asylum, to return him to the U.S. "There's been no change in our position," he told reporters. "He faces felony charges here. He ought to be returned to the United States, again, where he will face full due process and protection under our system of justice, that we hope he will avail himself of." On Sunday, Richard Leggett, head of the NSA's task force investigating damage from Mr. Snowden's leaks, discussed the possibility of an amnesty deal on the U.S. television channel CBS. "My personal view is, yes, it's worth having a conversation about," he said. "I would need assurances that the remainder of the data could be secured, and my bar for those assurances would be very high, would be more than just an assertion on his part." Personal opinion. Mr. Carney said on Monday that the proposal represented Mr. Leggett's personal opinion and such decisions were ultimately made by the Department of Justice. Earlier, NSA Director General Keith Alexander also dismissed the idea. "This is analogous to a hostage taker taking 50 people hostage, shooting 10, and then say, 'If you give me full amnesty, I'll let the other 40 go.' What do you do?" Earlier this month, Alan Rusbridger, editor of The Guardian newspaper, which has published many of the Snowden documents, told UK MPs that only 1% of files leaked by Mr. Snowden had been published by the newspaper. The US has charged Mr. Snowden with theft of government property, unauthorized communication of national defense information, and willful communication of classified communications intelligence. Each of the charges carries a maximum 10-year prison sentence. At the weekend, the NSA allowed a CBS television crew into its headquarters for the first time, in an effort to be more open about what the agency does with the data it collects.